All right, time now for the other Kenya, and tonight we are having that discussion by the that has been precipitated by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights report. It was released earlier this week. The title of that report is our hashtag tonight as well, Era of Terror. That, of course, dealing with legacy, what seems to be a continued legacy of extrajudicial killings and alleged enforced disappearances by security apparatus in this country. We have in studio to discuss this at my extreme right the Vice Chairperson of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, George Morara. Thanks very much for joining us.
And
right next to him from IPOA, the Independent Police Oversight Authority, we've got Tom Kagwe. Thank you very much for joining us as well. I'll just start by directing our attention to our walls right now, our super walls, and the hashtag itself speaks volumes, but perhaps not as much as the names that you were able to collate, George and your team, during the period that you did. 25 people dead and 81 people missing, right? That's a staggering number by any measure, and in any country that would be a staggering number, especially out of the circumstances that the KNCHR claims. First question: why did you present this to IPOA ahead of time, ahead of the release of the report, so that the investigations could commence?
John, thank you very much for that question. Actually, let me start by saying we were very clear as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights that this is a preliminary report. Having said that, I want the viewers to know that as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we've stayed on course on issues to do with terror-related deaths and disappearances since 2011. We've been in constant communication with the other agencies, the relevant agencies that we work with very closely. We sit, for your information and for the information of the viewers, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights sits on the IPOA board. We've written numerous letters to the National Police Service Commission, to the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. So again, for us, we don't look at this report. I was joking with Tom before we came here. This is not your classical thing of what we used to be taught in school, like it's not a Simon Makonde report, born on Monday, then it's dead on Sunday. But it's a process that has involved all the key actors. So just to answer your question directly, we've dispatched this report to IPOA. I don't know whether they have received it. We've sent this report to the Kenya Defense Forces. I don't know whether they have received it. We've sent a copy to the National Police Service Commission, to the National Police Service. And as I said at the beginning, this is part of a process where we've involved these actors. I've carried a whole host of papers here to just show the viewers that this is a process that has been ongoing. We've written to the minister seeking for audience, and where possible, we've had meetings with IPOA and the rest of the agencies. So for me, this is a process that's ongoing, and nobody can say that they don't know what the Kenya National Commission has been doing insofar as highlighting these massive violations, like you say, the 25 dead and the 81 disappeared.
All right, Tom, IPOA, having seen this report, I am guessing that you have seen this report. Is this the biggest chunk of evidence that you've received so far implicating the police that you have oversight of, at least because you deal directly with oversight on the police? Is this the biggest chunk of evidence that you've seen so far, and how are we going about looking into this?
I think one of the most important factors under analysis is that this is not the final report. It is a preliminary report. That's what we've received. Beyond that is that it has been received by the Independent Policing, not Police, Oversight Authority, and it's being analyzed right now, and therefore our take on it, including one of the recommendations that we investigate the abuses of those who have disappeared, of those who are dead, and those who have allegedly been extrajudicially executed, will have to be analyzed within the authority, in particular by the Directorate of of Investigations, Directorate of Complaints and Legal Services, and of course the Directorate for Inspections and Monitoring.
Yeah.
We will analyze what we can see. But one of the most fundamental things is that it would have been at least proper for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to inform us ahead of the launch of a preliminary report. Usually it is not, maybe it's not within their purview, but it is always proper to inform our authority like ours on even a preliminary, before even they launch it. At least we have a copy, so that we can begin investigations before any evidence or scene of crimes are interfered with.
All right. So what I'm getting here is that the KNCHR did not give you an advance copy of this report.
Yeah, we got a preliminary report once it was launched.
Once it was launched.
Yeah.
Okay, George, I have to throw this back to you. It's a preliminary report.
Absolutely.
The findings, I've gone through this report. The findings, the testimonies are quite shocking. But it is a preliminary report.
Absolutely.
Is it too premature to release evidence such as this that seems to implicate our security agencies when you don't even have the final report? You haven't investigated all of these cases to their conclusion.
I wouldn't say so, John. And for us, there's a reason why we've decided to release this report at this period in time. As I said, since 2011 to now, we've been seized of these kinds of happenings, where we've written numerous letters to the relevant authorities asking them for meetings. Actually, the latest letter that we wrote, covering a broad area of security issues, was to the new coming CS, the retired General Joseph Kwanserian, and that was on 29th of May, asking for a meeting. It's not come to pass. We haven't gotten that meeting. We've written, like I said, to the National Police Service Commission. We haven't gotten that meeting. Sometimes I feel, and I see, like tonight, I was hoping that would also have, I don't know whether you invited them, the police, to sit with us here and respond. If they cannot respond to these issues when we write to them, and as I was saying earlier, and I want the viewers to know this, we've done everything that we could within our powers to highlight these issues. And if then there's no response that seems to come from the relevant authorities, then we have to use other avenues and put it out there, at least as a way of putting a deterrence to these.
All right, I get your point, and yes, we did invite the police. We didn't get a response from them by the time we were going to air. We did invite representatives of the National Police
and
Service.
that speaks a lot to the attitude generally.
It might, but we're not here to try them. But George, the point still remains that perhaps the threshold is what they're looking for in terms of what you've been able to investigate. You are, of course, you are a constitutional body, and you should be working to help the situation. Wouldn't releasing evidence, even at this preliminary stage, make it more difficult to investigate those who perhaps are involved in this, those who perhaps are perpetrating this, and give them a heads up that, hey, look, we've got this evidence about this person and we're coming in this direction, and therefore they'd have time to perhaps even get rid of the evidence that they have.
But I think to assist George,
yeah,
who's been my colleague in the human rights movement, let's not dwell so much on the process. Let's dwell on the content. Before this report, there have been many reports. The Cry of Blood by Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. That time, together with him, I was working with the Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Yeah. There
have been many other reports, and I'll mention them specifically. The report by Philip Alston of February 2009 on, he was a UN Special Rapporteur, United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions and forced disappearances and arbitrary arrests and executions. He released a great report, preliminary as it was. You know what the police called it? Bigoted activism by the professor. He spoke to us, he spoke to George, he spoke to me. there has been another report. Philip Waki released a report on what happened in particularly in that time Nyanza province, where police were responsible for over 400 deaths. If we narrow in on the content, because people may want us to dwell on the process, but if we deal with the content, it's very clear. Police, whom you had invited, and they have refused to come. There is a clear rationale over time that they have been committing these issues.
Yes, that's true, though, but in terms of the content, it's very hard for a lot of people, especially defenders of the police force, to look at the content if the content itself is called into question through matters of threshold of evidence.
I will tell you this. There are true thresholds of evidence. On matters of criminality, it's very clear. It's about reasonable doubt. On matters of such an investigation, is balance of probabilities. If you want to measure whether on balance of probabilities that Hassan Suleiman Mwayuyu is dead, and Mvumbo is dead, Delawa is dead, Mwasalim is dead, Bonga is dead, balance of probabilities is what actually we should be first thinking about. But if cases are investigated and a criminal prosecution proceeds, then we go to the reasonable doubt. When we do these balances of probabilities, it is crystal clear. Even Philip Alston did not use reasonable doubt. It would be, for me, defeatist to argue that the Kenya National Commission should rely on reasonable doubt. Right now we are dealing with the balance of probabilities. And on issues NAMU, for you, even as a media house, we listen to you. We listen to your colleague, Ali. When we listen, what we measure is on the balance of probabilities that this person is dead or not. It's clear for us
that
when
these people are...
There is a possibility, not all reports can be, we are not fault-finding. And I would urge the Kenya National Commission not to be fault-finding, but they don't. It's a question of when you look back at the evidence, and let me say this, for Independent Policing Oversight Authority, the board is seized of the matter of enforced disappearances. We have, and we will be discussing these matters at length in the next 1 month or so, like every other Wednesday, because it seems there is clear evidence from what we can gather so far that people have just disappeared from their homes. Whether they have joined Al-Shabaab, we can't tell. Whether they have disappeared in search of jobs in Dubai, we can't tell. Whether they are dead,
you can't tell, but there are...
John, let me just say something very quickly. I think, just to add on what Tom is saying, I don't think it's fair and proper for us as a constitutional commission, a state agency. I don't think it's fair for it to appear like we want to fault find with the police and all this. That is not why we're here, really. But I just want to say one of the reasons why we've done what we've done is for a very long period of time, I think our police operates from a very, I don't know, a principle whereby it's, and maybe Tom also likes saying this, hear no evil, see no evil, say no evil. We are not the only people who have raised this. In fact, I remember very well, recently when the president was in Mombasa, he mentioned the issue of this enforced disappearance. It had been brought to his attention. It is very wrong for us as a commission to be turned into a state whereby we are now almost playing a whistleblower role just because our other compatriots are acting as if we are less government than they are.
We are government.
We are together in this, and we should actually work together.
You are government, but the denials aren't just coming from the police. They're coming from as high as the Interior Permanent Secretary, Principal Secretary rather, Monica Juma, who here, right after President Barack Obama left, made a denial about enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. On this bulletin, and she's not the only one to have done this. The president's statement seems to be the only one that seems to acknowledge that this seems to be going on how then do you work as government if at one level there is some level of acceptance, if not even implicit, that this could be going on, and at another level there is a blatant denial of the same?
Sometimes people just watch for the wind, maybe for what the president is doing. And I was actually saying, for example, when we look at the issue of the so-called war on illicit brews and all this,
or corruption,
or corruption, people actually knew these things were happening. Did they have to wait for the president to say something before they did their work? If we look at what's happening in Mombasa now, Mambo-Emi, Hadarati and all the other stuff, did it have to take the president going there to actually say we have a problem for the relevant agencies to act? I'm very encouraged. I don't know what's actually, you've been carrying news about a siege at the Kilindini hub and all this. For me, those are examples of what should be, the police, the CID should be doing, going in, preventing these crimes before they occur, instead of waiting for them to come here, and then the president is again forced to break the law, go out there in the seas to blow up some vessels and all the other stuff. So I think to a large extent, people have been given jobs by this constitution. They are paid by taxpayers, and they must do what they are paid to do. So it cannot be that people sit and wait. Maybe now that the president has actually said there are those enforced disappearances, we may see a change of heart. Already we are seeing the government saying, let us change tactic. Let us engage and talk with these young people who have gone to Somalia. Let's try to rehabilitate them. We can't always use the hammers and tongs approach to deal with the issues of radical extremism.
All right, Tom, tell me about your engagement with the Interior Ministry with respect to matters concerning the police, and they're being implicated in crimes from as petty as street bribery and conmanship, and we've seen a lot of them in court, to crimes as serious as extrajudicial executions and forced disappearances.
I think, my friend John Allan Namu, you've said it all. I can just say I confirm, or I can say even one word, ditto, that those are happening. But let me begin from, I don't think Monica Juma is a person you want to quote.
She is the Principal Secretary of the Interior Ministry. We have to quote her as a matter of principle journalistically, and she is an authority in that field.
Authority in what?
An authority within the security apparatus. This is something that she's built her experience on.
Let me say it this way. The Independent Policing Oversight Authority has come to the public and opposed even her nomination as Cabinet Secretary in the office of the President. Maybe it passed the media houses, but my chairman, who's my colleague, Macharia Njeru, opposed it. And when he did so on behalf of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Because our workings with the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government has been, what should I say? I think we've just hit rock bottom.
So strained, to put it mildly.
You may say those words, but for me right now I can't use diplomacy. When we tried to deal with the, for example, police recruitment of 2014, which we said was full of corruption, favoritism, nepotism, we held a meeting, and it's only that the beauty is that I have never taken an oath of secrecy, and I will never take it anyway. The relationship between Independent Policing Oversight Authority with that particular individual, you cannot have anything to call home about. And when we post her nomination, when Parliament rejected her, we didn't even consider that maybe we were clear and crystal that she cannot, because
so
there are people who we work with in the Ministry of Interior.
Just to jump in for a moment here, there is a problem with the individual, but what is the relationship with the security apparatus? Because the report doesn't just implicate the police, it also implicates the Kenya Wildlife Services, it also implicates the Kenya Defence Forces. Now, that isn't part of your purview, but I want to listen to what your relationship is now with the police themselves, the Inspector General, those people. What's your relationship as their oversight body?
Okay, I will say this. That's why I corrected you that we are not independent police oversight authority.
Policing, sorry.
We are policing oversight authority, which means that any person who's conducting the functions of policing, be it Kenya Wildlife Service. Right now we have cases, one case in Narok, which involves several individuals who are rangers. They didn't know that they are under our purview. Kenya WS, or the Kenya Wildlife Service, if they operate against constitutional limits of policing, we will do what we can.
So this also includes the KDF?
KDF, we have powers over them in particular instances where under Section 33 to Section 35 of the Kenya Defense Forces Act, where they are involved in insurrection and peace work. For example, when they are called in to restore peace, they fall under the National Police Service, and National Police Service falls under us. So even the National Security Council understands this. That's why they ask us to monitor any operation involving police and the Kenya Defense Forces, insofar as they don't violate human rights.
All right, but their involvement, and this has been pointed out in this report, their involvement in matters to do with security, specifically terrorism, has been fairly inward-looking. In that they operate within the boundaries of the country, and some would say in contravention of the act that that gives them force of law. What kind of recommendations have you made? Because this is not the first time that IPOA has been done, and I'll swing over to you, George, in a moment. This is not the first time that IPOA has been seized of this matter. What kind of recommendations have you made to them with respect to that kind of operation?
We make recommendations which are practicable, both to the executive, particularly the ministry you asked me about, and also carbon copy to the National Security Council. I can own this up that we have not finished the report on the military operation because it's still ongoing. When we were asked by the National Security Council to provide oversight on the military police, the Kenya Defense Forces, and in their role when they were doing the operations in Garissa, Lamu, and other places. When we do so, we will make it very public, the recommendations about what should be done to police, to policing duties given to the military. But I can tell you without a blink in my eye that any person or office or service that attempts to do policing work within the purview of our law or the Constitution, particularly Article 244, if they don't operate within the Article 244 provisions and Article 238, which call for professionalism, which call for transparency, accountability, respect for fundamental rights, respect for human freedoms, and all those things, if they don't adhere to those, it is within the purview of IPOA to make recommendations, including investigate, and therefore we recommend prosecutions. That's what we do.
All right, we'll swing back to you. I just want to bring this to George's attention. In past reports, the modus operandi of the alleged perpetrators, be they police or someone else, would be gunshot wounds, those kinds of things that are fairly easily associated with people who are allowed to bear arms or at least have access to arms. But in this report we see hangings, we see strangulation, we see different modes of eliminating people who are either suspected or just picked up off the street, in raising the threshold of your evidence at that point, when it gets to that point of analysis of the manner in which people were killed. How difficult or how easy will this be to tie this to the people that you've already alleged are responsible, who are our security agencies?
John, we have this. You see, we are not talking about phantoms. We are talking about people. We are talking about victims. So we have victims. The ones who have not died, we have victims who have the evidence of the torture they have undergone and all this, and those are the victims that will help us move this process forward.
Yeah.
What they have told us, we've recommended again to IPOA, the ODPP, to take up this report.
Yeah.
We can link them up with those victims of torture, and then this process can be carried forward so that in a court of law, they can then really say what happened to them.
All right. Let me just bring Tom in for a moment with respect to evidence again, and this links to what I've just been asking George. When you're investigating the police, who do you employ? Who helps you investigate? Is it the police themselves? And when you're making these recommendations, either to the Kenya Defence Forces, to the government, what happens if they don't respect your recommendations?
I expected that question. We have the Directorate of Investigations within IPOA, headed by a director in charge of investigations, seasoned investigator, and he has a string, because it's a he has a string of investigators, very seasoned people. Some of them are police, some of them come from a human rights background, but according to our act, section 22, we are supposed to train all these investigators on human rights for purposes of understanding the dynamics between victims, remote victims, secondary victims, and also the financiers of that violence.
Yeah.
I will tell you this directly. We investigate as IPOA. We keep evidence as IPOA. We investigate police in a very clear manner that is within the Constitution in terms of fair administrative action. We give them a leeway to also respond. We ask them to come to our offices to record statements.
Yeah.
We have carried out those investigations with regard to victims also, so that they also record statements in witnesses that we may find, and also the police who are culpable,
yes,
who are potentially culpable. And then once we solidify, we analyze the evidence, and then we recommend to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions on what is to be done. I can tell you, out of the cases we have taken to the ODPP, out of 10, as a number, just to deal with the number, 9 have been passed for prosecution, and 1 has been returned that we need more evidence.
George, and unfortunately we have to start making our final remarks now. George, as a final remark, people who, perhaps even critics, the police, I'll speak on their behalf at this point, would say that a report like this helps a terrorist agenda because it gives further evidence to allegations that terrorist groups have been making, that certain groups are being marginalized. You can see from start almost to bottom, the victims there are Muslim. The victims there from start almost to bottom are Kenyan, Somali. What would you say to that allegation, that a report like this helps play into a terrorist agenda and gives them even further fuel to recruit more people into an extremist agenda?
John, thank you very much for that question, and very quickly I'll say one thing. I don't think we are a banana republic. We are a nation governed by the rule of law. I looked at the functions of the National Police Service Commission, the 3 formations, the Kenya Police, the Administration Police, and the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, about 32 functions. Nowhere is it listed that torture, use of excessive force, and forced disappearances is one of the functions of those 3 arms of the National Police Service. On the contrary, they are required to operate under Article 238, the principles espoused there, and Thomas clearly said that. I think the KDF Act is one of the thickest pieces of legislation we have in town.
Yeah.
But I think also looking at this, Section 3 of that Act is very clear, Part C. It also binds them to be operate under the human rights and fundamental freedoms and all, to respect that. So for me, the ones who are saying that this gives the terrorists an opportunity to really then find out our Achilles heel, are trying to tell us that as a country we should suspend the rule of law, we pass these laws ourselves. There is a reason why Chapter 4 is the biggest chapter of the Constitution. It's our history.
Yeah.
We've come from a terrible past, the Nyayo House chambers, torture chambers,
yeah.
To what happened during what Tom was saying, the cry of blood and all that, and we cannot go back there.
All right.
Continuously, we must be a country governed by the rule of law, and killing people through extrajudicial means or enforced disappearances is not a way of really keeping this country safe.
All right. I think on that note, we're going to have to wind it up there. That's a great way to end. Rule of law being the principle that guides all of us, whether police or people within the industries that we are. Thank you very much for joining us, George Morara, and Vice Chairperson, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, as well as Tom Kagwe from the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Yes, I'll remember that one. Of course, we did invite the police to join this discussion, members or representatives from the National Policing Service. They did not respond to our invitation by the time we went to press or got into this live bulletin. We keep that invitation open, considering the damning nature of this report done by a government, a state agency. The news continues in a moment. You can keep your feedback coming through on the hashtag Era of Terror. Yvonne Okwara has been following this discussion. She's going to bring us a summary of what we've been talking about on What's the Point.
So even as we continue to interrogate that report by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, a number of things come into focus. One that is important is that the police must not only respond but act on the allegations made by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights regarding enforced disappearances. 81 missing, 25 killed, and hundreds tortured allegedly under the hand of the police, the security forces, is no mean allegation. It is something that must be acted upon to find out whether indeed, like we said at the beginning of this bulletin, the threshold will be met for evidence against any police officers, or whether indeed there is not enough evidence. But this is something important that the police must act on as soon as possible. The second point tonight is that the rule of law must be upheld. Now, what is clear, very clear, is that the difference between governments and terrorists and suspects and criminals is the rule of law, a law that we all live to abide by. Guilty, innocent rather, until proven guilty, and this applies to all suspects, including very prominent ones who may also be at the ICC at The Hague. That is something that must be granted to all. Finally, how does this affect the war on terror? We must be getting the suspects, gleaning as much information as possible, because the rate at which we're going, we're making Guantanamo Bay in the United States look even better. Now, in case you think this does not affect you, think about a young girl called Kwekwe Mandaza in Kwale. 8 police officers stormed into her house, allegedly looking for her uncle. During the evidence, one of them said she posed a threat by holding a panga. 8 police officers, all heavily armed. Now this just goes to impunity, and by the way, that matter is still under investigation and the inquest is still ongoing, but it just goes to show you this impunity that the police can continue to have if these instances are not investigated and action not taken where there is enough evidence to prove so. Let me wind up what's the point with this. You all know this saying. First they came for the communists. I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. They came for the Jews. I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. What will happen the day they come for you under the guise of being a terror suspect? That tonight is the point.